In the last video, you saw this Defender completely let me down after just 300 miles. And yeah, I regretted buying it, but I couldn't hate it because let's be honest, Defenders are special. And after going through the comments on the last video, I realised there's a lot of generous people out there. And I definitely took a lot of the comments on board and decided that the best thing I can do right now is get this Defender back on the road. That means no crazy engine swap just yet. As much as something like an M57 sounds like an unreal idea, this deserves something even more special later on. Something that actually turns heads when it goes past. But I can't get there without you lot. Only a small percentage of people watching these videos are actually subscribed, and the reality is subscribers are what actually keeps a channel like this going. The more this grows, the better these builds get, and the more I can give back to you lot that are watching. So if you're enjoying the journey, be part of it and hit subscribe. Now, as you know, I'm not a mechanic, but they do say that Land Rovers have been turning owners into mechanics since 1948. So I guess it's time to roll up my sleeves and give this Defender a second chance. Before we get into it, I just want to give a quick shout out to Friday Parts, who sent me out this digital torque wrench to use on the engine install. Friday Parts specialise in replacement parts and tools for diesel engines, agricultural machinery and construction equipment. So whether you're working on tractors, diggers or projects like this Defender rebuild, they've got a load of stuff that's pretty useful. When you're fitting an engine, there are loads of bolts that need tightening to a very specific torque setting. Things like the flywheel bolts, engine mounts and gearbox connections. So the first stage is removing all of the coolant hoses. Now this might sound like a simple job, but on an old Defender there's been through years of heat cycles, mud and who knows how many previous owners, nothing ever comes off quite as easily as you hope.
You broke your alternator.
That was the moment that Carl accidentally broke the alternator, but it's okay because fortunately we are not going to need it for the new engine. But anyway, back to removing the coolant hoses. Now they are just held on with hose clamps, so a flat screwdriver or 7mm socket is perfect for getting these off. Carl's currently removing the airbox and all the air hoses, so that this is out of the way and we can access the bolts to the gearbox. You can see my airbox is out of a TD5. I'm not too bothered by this, but it would be nice to have a proper 300 TDI one, just to keep everything looking a bit more original. But for now, it does the job perfectly fine, and the main goal here is just clearing as much space as possible around the engine. The more room you give yourself, the easier the rest of the job becomes. After removing the coolant hoses, I'm starting to remove the radiator housing and the fan surround. This is one of those stages where things should be straightforward, but of course, this is a Defender. Removing the viscous fan is an absolute nightmare. It had well and truly seized itself on the pulley. Because this engine is going for scrap anyway, we don't need to worry about damaging anything. So it was time for a slightly more Bushman approach. I got a crowbar in there to hold things steady while Carl used a viscous fan spanner and an extension bar for some extra leverage. After a bit of convincing, it finally gave up. While the fan is finally out of the way, we can now remove the cooling system. So one thing to keep in mind on here is that on the 300 TDI, the radiator also acts as the oil cooler. So there are two oil lines connected to it as well. Once these are disconnected, you can pull out the remaining part of the cooling pack, which really opens up the front of the engine and gets us one big step closer to pulling it out of the Defender. So now we just have to remove the fuel hoses, engine mounts, gearbox bolts and wiring harness. So whilst Carl works on removing those, I'm going to go underneath the Defender and start loosening the gearbox bolts. With all the essential parts now disconnected, we're finally at the stage where the engine can come out. Once we're happy everything is free, we can start lifting the engine out. And this is honestly a pretty surreal moment. Finally seeing this engine break free from the chassis is incredibly satisfying. You suddenly realise just how much of the vehicle one lump of metal actually is. And as you look over and see the clear engine bay, that moment really sinks in. The old engine is officially out. One massive step closer to getting this Defender back on the road. Now with the engine finally out of the vehicle, we've got perfect access to the clutch assembly. So while we're in here, we're going to be replacing a few of the key parts, starting with the clutch fork and release bearing. The clutch fork is a known weak point on these Defenders, and over time they can actually wear through where the slave cylinder pushes against them. When that happens, you suddenly lose your clutch and it can leave you stranded. The release bearing is another one of those components that are relatively cheap but buried deep inside the bell housing. So replacing it now while everything is accessible is just good preventative maintenance. It's one of those small jobs that can save a massive headache later on, especially if this Defender is going to be used as a proper daily driver. And with all the components in the bow housing complete, it is time for the big reveal. This might be the cleanest 300 TDI engine I've ever seen. It has been sat in a barn for years after coming out of a Defender with less than 20,000 miles on it. It has even still got the original factory barcodes on it, which tells me that this engine was manufactured on the 18th of January 2000. Honestly, it's unreal. And if this thing runs, we're back in business. So I think it's time to get the timing belt done, and then we can get this new engine into the Defender. This is the point where things start to finally feel like real progress again. Up until now, it's mostly been stripping parts off and preparing everything, but lifting the engine in is where the build really starts heading back in the right direction. Callum's also joined us to lend us a hand, which definitely makes life easier because lining the engine up with the gearbox is very much a team effort. Carl is on the engine crane, slowly lowering it down, while Callum is on one side and I'm on the other, guiding the engine and keeping everything lined up. The main goal here is to carefully align the engine with the bell housing so that the gearbox shaft can slide into the clutch. It's a slow process, making tiny adjustments as the engine comes down, just nudging it a few millimeters at a time to get everything perfectly lined up. But once everything lines up and the engine finally starts sliding into the bell housing, that's always a great moment because it means we're one big step closer to getting this Defender back up and running again. With the engine all lined up, we can now start securing everything in place. The first step is getting the bolts into the gearbox bell housing. These are what actually pull the engine and gearbox together, so it's important to thread them in evenly and make sure everything is sitting flush as it tightens up. I'm of course torquing everything up using the digital torque wrench that Friday Parts kindly sent me out. It just takes the guesswork out of tightening everything and makes sure that we're hitting the correct torque settings without risking over tightening anything. I've put a link in the description down below as well in case anyone else is tackling a job like this and wants to check it out. Next up, we can start putting the cooling system back together, starting with the intercooler and radiator. One important thing to remember here is that the 300 TDI, the radiator also acts as an oil cooler. So we need to reconnect the two oil cooler hoses before everything gets tightened down. With those back in place, we can start reconnecting everything else around the engine bay. That means putting the coolant hoses back on, reconnecting all the air hoses, breather pipes, the diesel line, and plugging all the wiring harness back in so that everything is ready to run. And now that the engine is finally in, it's time to move on to something I've been wanting to change on this Defender for a while. The wheels. It's currently sitting on Boost alloys with mud terrain tyres, and honestly I've never really been keen on this setup. I've always wanted to give this Defender a wider, more aggressive stance, which is why I ended up buying a set of Challenger 5-spoke rims with a -32 offset. Now these were actually ordered before the engine gave up because the plan for this Defender has always been bigger than just getting it back on the road. I want this thing to look tougher, sit better, and feel like the build is finally heading in a direction that I originally imagined. I know that these wheels aren't exactly the most practical choice, but with the future plans I've got for this thing, I think that this is the right route to take. And I'll leave links for everything in the description and pinned comment in case you guys want to check anything out yourself. I'm also going to need to fit some wider wheel arches before this thing ever sees its first proper test drive, assuming that it actually gets that far. But before we get carried away throwing even more money at mods, I think we need to deal with the most important thing first, getting this engine started. After all, this engine hasn't even been started in many years. I don't know for certain whether it was even running when it was pulled from the last Defender, but what I do know is that with the timing belt fitted, it turns over by hand smoothly, with no horrible knocks or signs of anything obviously wrong. So now, all we can really do is hope that it fires up, and hope that there's no major issues hiding underneath the surface. Because I'm so far into this build right now, that if this engine turns out to be no good, I will definitely need to cut my losses. So now it's finally time to fire this thing up. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but there was a slight click, and that click tells me the solenoid's getting power, just not enough to turn the starter. So this is the perfect excuse to put this Topdon JS2000 to the test. They sent me this out to review, and honestly there's no better way to test it than right now. It comes in this really neat little pouch, which inside you've got your jump leads, charging cables, and everything you need to just grab and go. It even doubles up as a power bank and a torch, which actually comes in handy. And it's got a built-in anti-surge protection as well, so when I hook this up, I know I'm not risking frying anything on the truck. So let's get it connected. Positive on, negative on, power it up, and let's see what happens. Okay, so we know that the battery is flat. I'm thinking that perhaps there's maybe air in the fuel system. So I'm going to go around, crack the injector lines, loosen the bleed screw on the top of the fuel filter and start working it through, just trying to get clean fuel movement. And there's still nothing, and I think I know exactly why. So when we timed everything up earlier, I wasn't 100% confident on the fuel injector pump. I actually set it to just after the compression stroke. That would actually mean that it's injecting the fuel too late, which would explain exactly why this thing won't fire. So I need to get access to that pump properly, and that means taking the viscous fan off again, taking the shrouding off. I can then go back in with the timing kit, lock everything in properly and make sure it's exactly where it should be. As I'd never done this before, I was obviously unaware that it should be on the compression stroke. And there she is running, and honestly it is a pretty incredible moment. After everything we've taken apart, all the hours we spent on it and all the uncertainty, hearing it fire up was just an amazing feeling. All the time we've put into this has finally come together to give this Defender another chance at life. And if that doesn't deserve a subscription, I really don't know what does. And as you can probably see, the look on Carl's face says it all. But honestly, I still can't believe how far we've come. I am of course really eager to give this vehicle a test drive, but before we do that we have to make it road legal, and that means I'm going to need to fit my new wheel arches. Now I decided to opt for some Spectra arches, and the only reason I'm fitting the Spectra arches are because I had bought another set of arches and they were dreadful quality, so I just needed to make sure I had something that was suitable for this vehicle to ensure I'm not breaking any rules on the road. I will of course look in the future at changing these to something less sticky outy, because they do stick out a little bit too far in my opinion. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of them, and if you have any suggestions on some that are better. Obviously these wheels have an offset, so they do stick out a bit further than the original arches would have. And also I don't want anything that these wheels could catch on, because I don't want to land up ripping them off when I'm driving. Now let's give it a proper test and make sure there are no obvious issues. All seems good with the Defender. It's running really nicely. I'm quite happy with this engine now. I do need to obviously build up confidence in it before I go on any long journeys in it, but you know, that will just happen over time. So yeah guys, onwards and upwards from here, and of course I would really appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this video. Even if you just enjoy Land Rover content, hit that subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.